And directly to our last speaker of this session, we'll have the coffee break after that, which is Bob Schiavone. I think he pronounces his name Schiavone currently. I think it was Schiavone in the past. And it sounds a little bit like a name from the series Sopranos, but I can assure you he's a very nice guy. He is Global Marketing Director for R&D Leverage. And in this position, he's in charge of strategic planning, company branding, and anything to do with sales and marketing initiatives. If you're ready, Bob,
ready. Is this okay?
Straight to you. Yeah.
I knew there was something. It feels like it's all crooked.
Yeah. That's fine.
Good?
Yeah, ready to go.
And it's on? There you go. Thank you. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly, as quick as I can. Thank you for the introduction, Noro, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. As you said, the title of the presentation is The Battle of Perceptions in the Plastics Industry. I get to say a few words, and I'll make it quick about who I represent in the company I work for, which is R&D Leverage. We were born in 1976, and through the years have rebranded ourselves to where we are today as R&D Leverage. As of just this past September, though, we were acquired from Adler Solutions, and I can say this much about the acquisition. It's fantastic. It's a long-term view of investing and growing the company, a 20-year plus view. So we're pretty excited. Same name, just a different look. Well, R&D Leverage really concentrates around the food and beverage, home and personal care, and the healthcare industries. We specialize in IBM, ISBM, and injection tooling, and we have a whole plethora of support functions around those tool types. If you were to look at an aerial view of our plant in Missouri, Lee Summit, Missouri, you can kind of see what I mean by the support functions around our manufacturing as a campus, if you will. And the same with our location in Nottinghamshire, in the UK. This is falling off.
Yeah. It needs to be.
There you go. It's that Italian nose of mine. So the Nottinghamshire facility as well is laid out the same way. The only difference there in the UK is we specialize just in the ISBM space, at least for now. So as I said, with the combined facilities, we have about 260 employees worldwide, 79 in the UK and 165 in the US. So that's the little tidbit I'll give you on my sales pitch about R&D. So on to the topic of the presentation today. I wanted to start first off by a lot of these awesome presentations I heard today are very, as they should be, very technical, right? Very engineering, technical, scientific. I come from a marketing background. I've been in marketing and plastics pretty much my whole career. I used to work for some of the larger converters. I used to Rexam and Precise, and either in the tool making side or the processing side, on both ends. And I bring that up only to say because I don't want anybody to think that the things that I'm presenting today make me an expert. I'm not saying that I'm an expert in these areas. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an internet blogger with millions of followers. Quite honestly, I'm just really passionate about our industry. And, well, I had made some passionate posts on LinkedIn, and truly that's what brought me here today. Now, if you were to look consistently through those posts that I've made throughout the years, you'd find some consistent remarks at least. One is I've really been frustrated with the anti-plastics agenda, as we all are, right? But it's now reaching this global political platform. What really angers me as well is there's all this energy and financial commitment on these feel-good campaigns that ultimately we all know that are going to cause more damage and harm to the environment. And I'm very frustrated with the industry being pointed at as this horrible plastics making machine, which we also know is not true. And instead of telling consumers that recycling doesn't work, why don't we spend that energy and time in helping fix the problem instead? But the biggest take-home message that I can't make any more clear is that our industry's lost touch with the consumer. And so one of the things I wanted to do is take this opportunity and talk, at least from my opinion, what we can do around that. Now, Marketing means a lot of different things to a lot of different people in different ways. So I'm going to use these two large companies as an example. These are companies that would be in a B2C space, right? Business to consumer space. If you look how much money McDonald's spends just on their marketing alone, about $460 million a year. And if you take a company like Microsoft, who spends $1.5 billion a year on their marketing, I ask you, if you truly believe that that's just to sell more cheeseburgers and software, then your definition and my definition of marketing are totally different. A little secret sauce about marketing, the intangible, the untraceable part of marketing, is it's truly a battle of perceptions. It's not a battle of products. And if you don't understand your customer's perception, then you don't understand their reality. It's not just a matter if they're right or wrong. Perception is reality. So why am I going off about all of this? What does that have to do with what we're talking about today? As a global market, we're about, what, $580 billion. And in that space, we are in a B2B space, but we spend absolutely $0 on a B2C space. We spend nothing on the consumers. So let me just start with this. Just like all of us in this room, kind of preaching to the choir, these are things that you already know. What does that really mean? We're really operating in silos. And I'm going to use religion, if you allow me for a moment. It's just like anybody who goes to a church or whatever. They go there to hear a message. But what if that message is obviously meant for more than just the people in that room, just like us here today? So the plastics industry has this really unique problem, in my definition. We're all attending different churches, different conferences. We're hearing different messages, but none of us have invited the most important people to the church, and that's the church of the consumer. So if you can't picture all these congregations, all these debates like we are here today, preaching and debating, all arguing with each other, all the while we forgot the most important denomination, and that's the church of the consumer. So look, I totally understand that there's some people who won't agree with all of this, but I can tell you the anti-plastics movement is really kicking our butts. And I know that there's many people in the room that are somewhat overconfident that, look, these are ludicrous statements. I've heard even some of that today. Plastics isn't going anywhere. The thing is, folks, brand owners who understand the consumer are following this lead. I heard some great data from Stereoplast. It's good to have you need to have some consumer research to bounce back what you're doing. And we're not doing any of that right now. So technically what I'm getting at is we're kind of living in a bubble, folks. We really are. So what is it that we can do, right? What are we supposed to do? Because honestly, we all understand the industry. We understand the polymers, the science, and the processes. Why aren't people believing us? Let's take just a little bit of walk down through history quickly. If you go back to the economic boom in the 1950s, society and everything we did strived for continuous growth, and then it was all of a sudden in 1962, it was proposed that plastics packaging stop using the word reusable and said everything belongs in the trash can. Well, that's when you entered the marketing campaigns of the 60s and the 70s. And one of the ones that most popular in the U.S. was Keep America Beautiful, and it was Don't Be a Litter Bug campaign. The onus, the message, on those campaigns were always putting the onus on the consumer. It's the consumer's responsibility. You bought the bottle. You should put the bottle where it belongs. Now, only as of 1997, I think actually into 2000, that we spent any money on any marketing to the consumer, and we stopped. We stopped doing that. So how did this happen? How did we get from there to where we are today? One of the most interesting things for me is I do not understand how we have any part of the conversation of the issue we have at hand when we don't talk about the issue with the China ban with our plastics processing, because China took almost half the world's discarded materials, right? But then as of in 2018, that stopped. And when that stopped, that's when we started realizing, all of a sudden waking up and saying, oh, almost 70% of this materials in landfills. Why is that? At least I can say specifically to the U.S., the state of the recycling in the U.S. today. Because recycling was so dependent on China for so long, and then when that stopped, we never had the infrastructure to make up that difference. This debate, when you bring this up to anybody who argues, it goes silent. There is no answer, and they don't know how to come back with it. I want to give you a little quick tidbit on something a lot of people don't know. There's about, I think, 20,000, let's say, local small governments within the U.S., communities, townships. They used to make money from their recycling. When you put recycling in where you live, they actually got income from that. It now costs them money. And if you would see what some of these townships have to pay out now, it's enormous. So they're literally looking at a balance for a budget, and it's school, police, recycling. It's really broken, folks. So I use these slides every once in a while to slow me down and remind me to get back on track, because we can easily do that. Well, it's obvious that one thing that we've learned, we can't put the consumer in charge. It doesn't work. We know that now. But while we allow this to happen, groups like Greenpeace are taking what would be known as top brand owners and branding them as top polluters. Well, who is Greenpeace? I want to give you a little bit of background about Greenpeace, okay? What they are is a really well-oiled, well-run machine. They're a successful business is what I'd like to say. What they do really well is they like to invent an environmental problem, like a plastics crisis. They want to invent a simple solution, like banning plastics, and then they like to pick an enemy, which is the industry ourselves. And they will dismiss any alternative solutions, like alternatives to plastics. Every time we hear this come up, it's a battle. I want to give you an idea also on how much money we're talking about. Granted, some of that data is just a little bit out of date, but you can see they're a very well financially backed institution. And if you take a chunk of that money, specifically $521 million a year, that's how much you're spending on campaigns on anti-plastics groups. So I want everybody to know this. It's Greenpeace that told the world that almost all the garbage in the ocean is plastics. It's Greenpeace that came up with the phrase plastics crisis. And you know, when you have a really well-funded, well-oiled marketing campaign, do you know what happens? Your message starts getting picked up for free and being included even in documentaries. The word plastics crisis was put into the Blue Planet documentary. And if you've never seen it, which I highly doubt, Google it. It's the most watched documentary all over the world in multiple languages. So that's almost the greatest form of propaganda. If you haven't heard of any of their messages, unfortunately, I'm going to have to let you hear it.
Plastic.
Just one example.
It's everywhere. On our beaches, in our oceans, in our water, in the air, and now in us. No matter how remote the spot, you'll find it. But it hasn't been here long. Plastic was born after World War II, and the waste has massively multiplied since the new millennium. Almost everything we buy is wrapped in plastic, wrapped in more plastic, pushed out by consumer corporations, in partnership with chemical corporations and our old friend, fossil fuel. Because as shiny and clean as it looks, plastic is oil. But that's not a problem if we just recycle, right? Not when we find it's being dumped anyway, or burnt, or dumped in other countries, and then dumped again, or burnt, and as ever more plastic enters the system, only a tiny fraction ever gets recycled. There's no shortage of green marketing, often just to sell more plastic. But although some efforts are being made to clean up the mess, we need to stop the flood at its source. The question is, how? A global treaty is the first chance for big brands, governments and people to come together, find solutions to end this plastic crisis, and rid ourselves of a system that profits from the mess. Because a problem that's everywhere needs the help of everyone.
Very difficult to watch, and I've had to practice that speech and watch that one too many times. But I'm going to jump to a whole another area, because I don't want anybody to think this is just my opinion. I'm very big about consumer research. And there was a really good article that was put out from the Shelton Group. The Shelton Group does nothing but consumer research. And some of the things I wanted to bring up was, in their polling, there's a lot of people, like a lot of us in this room, feel that the anti-plastics folks aren't really making headway, because it's not affecting our bottom line. But the polling, it showed that it's about 67% of the global consumers that they researched really want the consumer to take responsibility for the end-of-life product. I'm sorry, I got off track there. Then several people had asked in the audience, apparently, at that conference, why isn't the public taking any responsibility? And the polling had showed that consumers want to know what the industry is doing about the problem. They're not interested anymore about it's Asia's fault, it's the U.S. fault. They're not interested in that anymore. I found this very interesting, that in the polling, it showed that in the 1990s and 2000s, when we did market to the consumer had a much more favorable opinion of plastics. That's because we spent money talking to the consumer. I found this strange, though, that that particular group said they were skeptical that an approach like that would make sense today. And I don't understand why that is. So as I move on, you take the information I showed you, you think about this. As the years pass, younger people have taken hold of the history, the information, and they interpret it the way they want to themselves. Fast forward 50 years to where we are today, and the anti-plastics movement is in full gear. I'm going to show you one more video.
What will life be like in 2050?
Our beautiful oceans will have more plastic than fish.
Our majestic mountains will be mountains of plastic.
And when I'm grown up, my body will be full of plastics.
Making me sicker, fatter, which will be slowly killing me.
2050 does not have to be like this. We've created plant-based alternatives to plastic to create a healthier planet for our children's future.
Join us and pledge 2050 I quit.
Very frustrating to watch. But this continues. If you drive through the most highways now in the U.S., more and more you'll see billboards directly telling consumers that recycling is a myth. It's a lie. And now we're considered to be the world's #1 leader in climate change. It's getting to that point. And this is what you call virtual signaling. When you have a large corporation like Amazon who likes to tell people that they're stop polluting with plastic, but yet my wife had ordered a small little package from Amazon, and it came in this large cardboard box with all this plastic bubble wrap. So I assume they feel that it's okay to say, we'll jump on the bandwagon and get off plastics, but we can abuse all other material. I thought this was crazy when I seen an article in Plastics News how Hollywood doesn't want to show any more single-use plastics on any of their movies or television shows. If you're in designer and packaging design, you'll get a special reward now and awards just if you can show how you've eliminated plastics in your design. We're all well aware about the plastics ban that's happening in Europe, but were you aware that there's apps available for consumers and how they can track plastics and remove them from their life? In the U.S., I think there's 600 national parks throughout the U.S. All single-use plastics have been banned to be sold in anywhere in those parks. What really woke me up and started to upset me is the seat at the table here in Belgium, actually, not too long ago, where the anti-plastics group is now making more headway in creating laws and taxes. Here in Belgium, used to be well known for some of the best recycling rates in the world, but yet a well-oiled marketing campaign, if you Google that, you'll find there's more articles showing that that's false than the actual facts. So, as we move on, I think that we realize we're producing a ton of this stuff. What? 380 million tons of it a year. I think you can at least understand a little bit better why the consumer is so confused. But did you notice from the beginning of this presentation or the beginning of this issue, it was a litter problem, and now it's just a plastics problem. Now, there's some good things. I don't know a lot specifically about the Plastics Pact. At least I'll say that there's some good things happening, a lot of finance and effort from being put in more positive message. The American Beverage Council is doing this really good job of bring every bottle back. You can look them up. But I'll give you an example. Again, a well-oiled PR campaign. Go ahead and Google bring every bottle back. It pretty much tells everybody, and I think I lost count of over 50 different articles that's saying plastics can't be recycled into new bottles. It's a lie. I've had someone come to me and said, Bob, you're overreacting. There's some good news. Look at this mainstream article. That's good stuff. I'm like, yeah, that is a great article. Except when you read deeper into the article, it tells you right in there, in order to do that, you would have to have 80 recycling plants. Is this one mine? You'd have to have 80 recycling plants by 2025. I'm not very sure that they've built any right now. So, they're great messages, but what was missing? The consumer. And here's where perception really starts to make sense. No matter how much of this good stuff that we do, will it really matter? I heard some great innovations today, but how much of it will matter if the consumer doesn't believe you? Good things can happen. They are happening. I have no problem in believing that we support and invest in recycling. I think that it's a good idea for us to volunteer and help clean up the oceans and streamline, refine plastics usage, but we have to find a way to show the world our efforts in both of these areas and do it with a marketing campaign that it needs funding, it needs direction, it has to have history and talk about the facts. And you can't do one of these items and not the other. They have to be done in unison. If we don't do this, this messaging is going to continue, folks. They're not going to just roll over and decide to spend their money elsewhere. Everyone else is talking about plastics with consumers except the plastics industry. And all I'm trying to do is give us a voice where we don't have one. Public opinion, perception. We have to write it or we will fail. Everyone has an opinion these days, you can back them with data and facts. In the age of the internet now, everyone sees each other's opinions. But the thing is I think most of you agree, it's beginning to get too noisy. And when it gets too noisy, we begin to shut it all off. And we begin to work again in these silos, in these churches, and we're not listening anymore. And when you don't do that, you have miscommunications, and that leads to misguided goals. Misguided goals lead to poorly executed ideas. If you don't believe me, that's how you end up with a paper straw and a plastic wrap. And I know there's people who say, Bob, calm down, relax. You know, this isn't really an international issue. This is mostly an issue for the U.S. If you believe that, you're very naive. I hate to tell you that. That is not true at all. Oh, this is only concerned for single-use plastics. Where are they going to end at just single-use plastics? I mean, I don't think. It's just like taxes. They don't simply go away. Or just simply the statement, this doesn't affect us. It affects all of us. And I know, I've even heard some today, we have new plastics or new processes and it's going to change the world. I hope at least you consider that what I've talked about today, that if you don't include the consumer, will that matter? And if you don't agree with anything I'm saying, I know you'll agree with at least one thing, I would hope. That if we can at least improve the perception to the consumer, it would affect all of our bottom lines, regardless. So, what is it we can do? If you're doing anything that's helping improve the process, think about how you involve the consumer. Share facts. Start at home, social media, our own company website. We have a site dedicated, If Plastics Are Evil, giving facts and data. There's a lot of good information out there, folks, that we should be sharing. If you have a LinkedIn account, use it. Share that information. And I found some really good alternative plastics, materials is a very hot topic. I shared this on LinkedIn, and I was shocked that it received almost 44,000 views. That's when I started to realize what a hot topic apparently it is. And there's a lot of other good data out there. Find it, use it, share it. I think I've made one thing clear. The anti-plastics group is not going to fall asleep, and just go away. And the amount of money and effort that they are putting against our industry is non-stop compared to what our industry is doing or spending, which is absolutely zero. And who is it that we go to is another challenge. Because in our industry, we got several leaders and groups that head up our industry. I don't think we need another coalition to run this, but I do think it has to be a combined effort. As I come to a close, when I got into this industry, if you ask people what were plastics, the first answer they would usually say is they were durable. And then somewhere along the way, plastics became cheap, but in a positive way. Cheap was cheap to process, cheap to manufacture. But then somewhere we've allowed it to where plastics became cheap, meaning cheap quality, cheap material, to where we are now, where plastics can kill you. I showed you that slide where I said I have a marketing mindset. So that's why I worry, because I'm saying, who's maintaining the brand of our industry? So I appreciate everybody's time. And if we have some time for questions, that's great. If we're not, we can move on. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you, Bob, for the great pep talk, and also quite an achievement to go through so many slides. You really on time.
You did you?
Fantastic. I did not believe you. Yeah, now I do. Questions for Bob, please. I think you shocked these people.
Yeah. Well, we won't be here tomorrow because our executives, but I forgot to bring up, we have an executive here from the UK and an executive here from the US. If you have questions about R&D, I'll be here this evening, later at dinner, if you had any other questions. That would work too.
Let me suggest something. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment. I think there's, and it's just my feeling, okay? maybe people disagree here, but sometimes I feel that with these things, the industry is kind of thinking, oh, you know what, this is another campaign. We've seen a campaign against PVC, and it kind of went away. It fizzled out at some point. And this will fizzle out as well. And if we keep a little bit quiet about it, we don't do much, in the end, it's going to go down. I think in this case, you're right. It's not going to go away so quickly. And I think we need to show, as an industry, a bit more spine, which is what you are saying. And we need to fight our corner a little bit better than we do. Not just roll over with the latest fad, and agree that basically plastics is the biggest problem in the world. It is a problem. I think objectively it is a problem. But I think it's a problem that has solutions, and it's a problem that has also is to a certain extent balanced by many advantages and many solutions to other problems. Like I said, things like food waste. We don't. If you ask any consumer today, somebody in a supermarket, most people don't really understand how bad food waste is for the environment. It's disastrous for the environment. But people think it's just food. It's natural. It decomposes. So I think you're on to something there, Bob. I don't know if somebody wants to bring another opinion. Tom, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Very nice presentation. I think in this room everybody will agree with what you said. But on the other hand, just making the communication, I think you're right. We are weak. We're not doing it strong enough. But we still need to find a solution. We have a lot of technical solutions we've been talking about here, which are great. We're all very busy with it. But to start, we need to get the waste. And that's the issue. Because at the end, they are right. It is ending in the wrong spot, wrong place. Right. Because we don't have the infrastructure to go and get it. And I'm not quite sure how we're going to be doing this, all in our different industries. Maybe in my industry, it may be easier. Industrial packaging is more focused on some specific industry segments. For the bigger world of consumer, I'm not quite sure what the answer is. But, okay, doing the communication will push people to think, no, plastic is not that bad at the end. This Greenpeace message saying that plastic cannot be recycled, just the title by itself is misleading and is a lie. But what is the real solution? In this, I'm still struggling with it.
The one most interesting thing to bring up is, I said, the infrastructure. For some reason in this whole debate and discussion, we never talk about who's building recycling plants. We need more in the U.S., number one. I am convinced that that's the first thing that we should be doing. There's another flip side to that. There's no incentive, because who wants to build a recycling plant when it's not lucrative? It's very backwards right now. And if you call a recycling plant, I've done this in the U.S., and asked them, because our community where I live, there's recycling bins. I tracked it and traced it. None of it's getting recycled. It's not getting recycled. So what do? Is I think we need to start with building the plastic recycling infrastructure. We talk about PCR. How are we supposed to have enough PCR, as you said, if we don't have the recycling infrastructure to fill it? So it's a broken system. So to me, the first thing is building the plants, building the recycling plants. I don't know, same as you, where to start, how does that happen? Maybe it has to be a government-funded initiative, specific at least to the U.S. Maybe that's how they start. But it is definitely a mess, and definitely something that needs to be addressed, for sure.
Okay, Hans, and that's it for the moment. You are free to, of course, continue the debate during the break. No problem with that.
My name is Hans Wiedler from Lion Delbazell. maybe also to build a little bit on Tom's comment, I think indeed getting material back is very important to get the feedstock. I think there is certainly interest for suppliers to build those manufacturing companies for recycling. I think they are already there. I think there's a lot of things ongoing for sure in Europe. I'm not so much into the US from that matter of fact, but I think you are building also a lot about the branding of plastics in general. And you mentioned in one of your last slides a lot of organizations where to go to or who should take a certain responsibility in that. But in the end, what now to do next? I think still that to get to that consumer or to those consumers worldwide, because they need in the end to get the bottle back, right? So they need to, we should not allow the litter, but it's also with the consumers. And there are, I think, 7 billion people out there. So how could we do that? How could we increase the branding of plastics, explaining also the benefits from it? I mean, we've learned this morning about this plastics around this cucumber wrapping, that it is extending basically the usage of the food by a couple of weeks, which is probably much more of interest for the consumer than maybe the thinking about the waste of the wrapping. So how do we get to this next step in your opinion? How do you see that?
It's a very good question, and it's probably the biggest thing I struggle with is answering that. Because the reality is it has to be a coalition effort. It has to be companies and brands and competitors as well working together. I would think that I'll make this quick, is if I know that some of the innovations I've heard today, you know, you need to be thinking about how you share some of that innovation with the consumer. So if you say how, start with even LinkedIn or social media. Start getting that word out, not just from the business perspective, from what you're selling is for your company, but the advantage to the consumer. It's at least a start. And the same with your own company webpage, start putting that information out there. But I think the real answer is when is this industry going to get work together and figure out how we can do this? Because there is a lot of coalitions, but none of them are working with the consumer. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of food for thought there, Bob. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.